In 600 feet, continue straight.
Okay, I'm on the road up to Kitt Peak, which is the National Observatory. I decided to break camp tonight from the National Wildlife Refuge, Buenos Aires, and drove up here. I could see the white buildings on top of the peak, but I think I'm at 4,000 feet at this point, so it's really cool. You can tell how high we are. The rock formations here are beautiful. So, anyway, I'll take you up the peak as we move up the road. All right, now we're at 5,000 feet, above 5,000 feet a little bit, and we're making our way up to Kitt Peak, the National Observatory. The rock formations here are incredibly beautiful. The road is very treacherous and windy, a lot of rocks, a lot of rock falls, but luckily none on the road so far. But we are way up there.
Was built to withstand a wind of up to 125 miles an hour, but it has withstood winds up to 165 miles an hour. The special instrument that I was telling you about is that black cylinder up at the very top. And that instrument up there weighs 11 tons. And that's why the U.S. Department of Energy was so excited to get this telescope, to be able to put a very heavy instrument up there. So what is this telescope doing? This telescope is working on creating a 3D map of part of the universe to capture information about the expansion rate of the universe. This telescope has 10 enormous spectrographs in a back room that is fed with the data, and it breaks the light into its color components and separates out all of the data and then sends the whole kit and caboodle to the University of Illinois, where they reduce the data for the scientists. What they are studying is the expansion rate, and they're studying something else. And I'm going to give you just a snippet of history here, because this is really fascinating to me. You know, we think things change quickly in our lifetimes. What has changed with science in the last century is just absolutely amazing. In 1925, Edwin Hubble, remember that name? Edwin Hubble was doing some measurements, and he was looking at stars in a fuzzy nebula in our galaxy. And when he got done with his measurements, finding out how far away those stars were, he found out that they were 10 times farther away than the edge of our known Milky Way. It was at that time then that it was discovered that we are not the only galaxy. They discovered in 1925 that those fuzzy things they were looking at were other galaxies. So, you know, that wasn't that long ago. And Then in 1929, just a few years later, good old Hubble was doing some more studying, and he found that when he was looking at galaxies that were far away, the farther away the galaxy was from us, the faster away it was moving. You could tell this by measuring the redshift. So the farther away it was, the faster away it was moving from us. That is when scientists came up with the Big Bang Theory. A lot of people hear that the Big Bang Theory started with this little singularity, and then there was a giant explosion. And I've been watching this program, or listening to this program, with two astrophysicists, and they're not describing it so much that way anymore. They're talking about this big, very, very hot, dense, soupy place that just all of a sudden expanded. It just went poof. And that is what their impression of the Big Bang was. Who knows? Maybe someday we'll really know. But at any rate, in 1998, there were two separate groups of astronomers and astrophysicists who were doing more measurements and looking at Super 1A novas, which are special types of novas, supernovas. And they were measuring those, and they found that there were some of these supernovas that were moving unusually fast, and they found, and these two groups found it independent of each other, so they were actually able to verify each other's findings, that the expansion of the universe has accelerated. So that kind of defies the laws of gravity, the laws of relativity as we understand them, where if something explodes, eventually, there's going to be a collapse. Well, they're finding that that's not the case. There was the regular expansion, and that at some point in the history of the expansion, it started accelerating. And now, with this instrument up here and the studies that they're doing, they're finding some oddness with the acceleration of the expansion. Like, it's not consistent, it's not really in a pattern, but this is something that they're very interested in. And the thing that's causing the acceleration of the expansion is called dark energy, because they have no idea what this force is that has increased the expansion of the universe and is speeding it up. So, maybe I'm reading something into this, but the U.S. Department of Energy wanting to find out what this magical force is that's driving all of the galaxies farther and farther apart. Maybe it's something that would be useful to us at some point. I don't know. But I'm glad that somebody's researching it, because, to me, all of this is quite fascinating. And the more you study it, the more questions you come up with. And I think it just makes a great puzzle out of the whole thing. And a great point for curiosity and ongoing education. So what this instrument is doing up there, they removed the secondary mirror from the very top. And they put this instrument in its place. So the light hits the primary mirror, never mind the hole in the middle of it, that just doesn't matter. The light goes back up and it's funneled through that canister. Inside of that canister, there are 6 correcting lenses. So they're not mirrors, they're lenses like you have in your eyeglasses. So when the light comes back through from reflecting off of the primary mirror, those lenses are making the light more and more precise. So it goes through 6 of these lenses. This telescope has what's called a wide angle of view, so we can see a good piece of the sky at one time. Up at the very top of that instrument, there's the focus plate is up there, the plane of focus. And what that is like, envision a metal pizza. And that pizza is cut into 10 slices. And each one of those slices has 500 holes drilled into it. And through each one of those holes, there's a fiber optic cable to capture the light that's coming from the universe, and a little robotic arm that operates that little fiber optic cable. So there are 5,000 little robotic arms up there holding and maneuvering fiber optic cables. So when the light goes through the correcting lenses, the fiber optic cables are sitting there and they're ready to get that very, very precise light. So what is the telescope looking at? It's looking at 5,000 galaxies at one time. During the night, it will look at 100,000 galaxies. And it collects the spectra from those galaxies and sends the light to the spectrographs to break the light into its color components, look at the absorption lines, do the measurements, send all of that data to the University of Illinois. It gets reduced, and then the scientists get it to study it. So the scientists got their first load of reduced data this last spring, and there were articles in the New York Times talking about this DESI. We call it the DESI instrument, even though the I on the end means instrument. So DESI instrument. And the scientists were very pleased with how this telescope is performing and the data that they are getting from this telescope. So this was supposed to be a 5-year project. They're about 3 years through this project, maybe 3.5. The scientists are getting ready to get another load of data. And it's my understanding, it started out as a 5-year project. I believe it has been renewed for another 5 years. Now they're talking 15 years and probably some improvements or a brand new instrument up at the top. So by gathering all of this information, the first 5 years, they're supposed to get all of the spectra from about 40 million galaxies, and they're creating this 3D map that will try to describe the expansion history of the universe. And from that, try to start understanding dark energy a little bit more. Now there's also a similar program going on with another NORLAB telescope in Chile. So that's called the Blanco telescope. It's the same size as this telescope. It has a very similar instrument on it, just a little bit different. and they're doing their own mapping of the southern hemisphere. So the goal to get this 3D map, and you know, the scientists are very happy with what they're getting.
How often do they get those data loads?
This will only be their second one, because it takes a long time to get the data into a usable format.
So it's
for
not
them.
once a year or
No, just when they have it ready.